It's playoff time, baby. We have finally made it to week 15. Fantasy football playoffs start this week. We hope that you've got all your teams in the playoffs, and we're here to help you answer all those start-sit questions and more right now.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything. Now you be surprised at the info you get is by letting them talk, so I'm letting them talk.
Welcome in to this week's edition of Another Damn Fantasy Podcast. My name is Trevor Steinbacher. I am your host, and as always, Josh Limasan right by my side here as we are preparing to take down round one of the fantasy football playoffs. Josh, how are we doing tonight?
Good. I survived my winning in one of my leagues, which was good. So I made it in with a 7-7 record. I'm also 7-7 in the ADP league, where I don't know if you've checked, but you and I are squaring off in round one.
I got it pulled up, ready to talk through it.
Don't let my record fool you. I checked. I'm the highest points against in the league, so
wow,
I'm gonna be a tough out. Maybe we'll see. I've had some questionable starts last week, and we'll probably get into a little bit of that as we go forward. But yeah, definitely in at least a few leagues, so it's gonna be a fun time of the year for sure.
Well, let's not bury the lead here. Let's just go right to it. I'll pull it up, I believe. You see it there?
I think so.
So this is our showdown this week.
Oh yeah.
First round of the playoffs. I think, is this 1 versus 8? I don't remember. No, so I'm the 3 seed. So this is 3 versus 6. Okay. Do we only have the top 6 make the playoffs?
Why is there a poop emoji by my points for down there?
Where?
Oh, that's points against. That's why.
Oh. That's a lot. Holy cow.
I know it must be because it's the most I faced the most points or something. So
probably so. That's
look at
awesome.
that. Look at that league parity though. Before we get to our matchup, look at how many 7-7s. Like I was sweating it because I was pretty affected by the bye last week, and then of course I sat Chuba Hubbard because everyone thought getting shut down by the Eagles, and then things happened. So it was
great.
risky, but I had enough points built up, I think, so we got lucky.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. It does look like apparently because there's not very many matchups. So the 1 and 2 seed must get a bye. We only take the top 6 into the playoffs. So our boy Tyler, who's every once in a while in the chat, doesn't make the playoffs. Our main man Kev, that you'll find on the bounce on Thursday nights, doesn't make the playoffs here. And then Lee, who's in the chat, we knew he wasn't going to make it, but he missed out in this league as well. So here we are, 3 versus 6. What question you got? Start-sit questions on this, or you think that you're pretty well locked in? I saw you making some moves right before we jumped on air here.
Yeah, so I'm in a weird spot because I'm actually, I'm starting Jalen Hurts. I'm not gonna veer off course right now. I don't think there's any reason to overreact, but I don't like his matchup with the Steelers. Really, I don't like that he's averaging like 25 pass attempts a game. So if the Steelers find a way to keep him out of the end zone on those tush pushes, or if he doesn't get any opportunities for that, I mean, he had a lot of rushing yards last week, and so I'm hoping for that again because he's not throwing the ball very well. But I'm a little worried, and I picked up a defense because I like the Cardinals matchup against the Pats this week, and I don't like that my quarterback was going up against my defense, but I'm torn because the Steelers defense has been great for me. It's been a set and forget all season. And has always they've had some really good weeks and some decent weeks, but they've never had a bad week for me. And so I'm kind of going back and forth there. I feel like I can expect an interception or two, maybe a couple sacks. So I might end up putting them back in, but yeah, otherwise I feel pretty good about my team. I think wide receiver is my weakest spot. And I'm a little bit running back heavy, which I think was a good way, kind of a good strategy. But now
it worked out this year. That's for sure.
Right. It worked out this year. And Khalil Shakir had a big week for me last week, which was great. And so I need to expect a little bit more from him, but I'm still waiting on Olave on IR. And if George Pickens can't go this week, then right now I'm starting, I never thought I'd be considering Xavier Lee yet in my in my wide receiver spot for my playoff matchup. But
I mean, he should have got a touchdown last week against the Eagles to win the game.
Yep.
Carolina's not going down. That's what you like to see. I think, and I know that I was planning on talking about this a little bit anyways. Like when you get into the fantasy playoffs, week 15, there's teams that are just downright down bad. They just suck. They're not, they don't care.
Yep.
They're not going to play hard. But Carolina, I mean, they've been getting after it and they're not going down easy. And you like to see that, especially if you got some of those guys in your fantasy lineups this week.
Well, and just from a football standpoint as well, you have Bryce Young playing well. I think we all like to see that. And I'm a firm believer. I'm a fan too, so I don't like when my team tanks, but I'm a firm believer that to have a winning franchise, you have to have a winning culture. And I think you can get too consumed with the tanking, philosophy and getting the high draft pick. At some point, you just have to be a place that people go to and like associate with winning,
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. But they gave the Chiefs a run for the money and they gave the Eagles a run for their money. So playing good football there and get a reeling Dallas team this week. So hoping for some big points there. For me, obviously I got Rico on the other side of that Carolina-Dallas game.
Yep.
I've got a couple good matchups. Calvin Ridley against the Bengals. You love to see that this week.
Oh, yes.
Gibbs against the Buffalo run defense. I'm excited about that. I'm not so excited about my tight end. I lose Will Disley. I've been kind of streaming tight ends left and right all season, but no Dallas Goedert. Maybe Greg Calcaterra can catch another touchdown pass this week. My biggest decision points, I have two really. Jaden Daniels versus Kyler Murray. Kind of been dealing with that all season long.
Yep.
I'm gonna go Jaden Daniels this week. I against this New Orleans team that, again, talk about teams that are pretty well just dead. I'm not worried about New Orleans pushing Washington because Washington has shown week after week that they don't care what happens on the other side. They're going to score points. And then I got this Isaac Grando thing. He's injured. Not sure if he's even going to play. I hope, for the sake of all that is fantasy football, I hope he's just out tomorrow night.
Right.
If he's out tomorrow night, I have no questions. I put Brian Robinson Jr. in, and I'm done.
Right.
But if he's in tomorrow night, then I have a decision against Isaac Grando against the Rams or Brian Robinson against New Orleans with Jaden Daniels. So that's really my biggest decision point I've got coming up. I'm not going to sub out any of the rest of these guys here. The only other things, I got Devontae Smith. He just really has, you already kind of talked about with Jalen Hurts, but Smith just has not really shown up this time of year.
If Smith didn't get a touchdown last week, he would have been 3 straight weeks under 10 PPR fantasy points.
It's just not involved. They're not throwing the ball, as you mentioned. So, and now I think with this AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts thing, I think that if they do throw the ball, I think it's probably going to find its way to Jalen or to AJ Brown more.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We'll make sure we recap this next week. It should be a fun time this weekend, sweating out this game. If you're here with us today, thank you so much. Hit that subscribe button here as we are on our way to 700 subscribers to the Bite Size Sports YouTube network. That's where you can find us each and every Wednesday night right here on the Bite Size YouTube network. Of course, we're playing each other, but we're also here to help you all in your fantasy football playoffs this week. So throw those start-sit questions in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Are you got a Garendo versus Brian Robinson situation going on this week? Throw it in the chat. Let us hear about it. Let us know. You don't have George Pickens this week, so now you got a couple lesser wide receivers you're trying to figure out who to start. Let us know in the chat. We will help you out. That's what we're here for.
Oh, sorry to cut you off, Trev. I was going to say, don't feel bad if you're like, is this really a debate? Because it's the playoffs, right? Every decision counts. And so if you are just because I'm a little bit anxious on all my matchups, I'm maybe overthinking things too. So throw something in the chat, even if you're pretty sure. Sometimes it's good to get that validation, or it's still good to hear the confirmation that, this guy for sure should start over this one. Or just in case you're off. But yeah, get those start sits in there so we can go over those.
Well, let's jump into our quick reaction from a wild week 14. I'll let you start here, Josh. Give us a quick reaction.
Well, I kind of stepped on your notes because I saw what you put in there, so I won't say everything on there. But it was an absurd week for a few people, and so I had a win and in one league, and the guy that I play now in that league, he had over 200 points this past week because this is a keeper league, so it's a little bit different. But he had Josh Allen, Puka Nacua, Tyreek Hill, Shad White, just monster games across the board. And it's the formatting is there's only eight players in that league, eight starters, right? And there's no kicker defense, so it's PPR though. But I still 200 points is insane. So we had Josh Allen's game overshadowing my Sam Darnold 5 touchdown game. Darnold threw for 5 touchdowns, everybody. And Kirk Cousins did not get his revenge, and the Vikings played well. So, but yeah, what a wild week. Jordan Addison, 3 touchdowns. Both him and Justin Jefferson at over 130 yards. I mean, there was points to be had everywhere this week. Zach Charbonnet, I mean, if you had him in any league, and that's, you mentioned, you want to, all you need is just someone to tell or to know for sure, is Isaac Guerrero in or out. I think that's another situation that myself included in one league and other people are probably looking at, like Ken Walker's day to day with his injury. And it would be nice to know, hey, he's going to be out for one more week so we can just start Zach Charbonnet, because if he plays and he's banged up based off the game that Charbonnet had, like, it's just so hard to predict how they're going to divvy up the touches. So I think we're all hoping for some guidance in that regard. Like, this guy's out, this guy's in, so that we know what to start. But yeah, points everywhere last week.
Yeah. Similar reaction. Obviously, just a bonkers of a week. If you play DFS, you had to have Josh Allen. You probably had to have Puka. All the Sam Darnold double stacks were just killing it at 3:00 Central, and then all of a sudden they're like falling down the boards. So the leaderboards so quickly. Just a crazy week. Josh Allen, obviously, with the 3 passing touchdowns and the 3 rushing touchdowns, which is just silly. But you mentioned it, Jefferson and Addison caught all 5 touchdowns. Like, it's just absolutely bonanza. But a really, really fun week 14. I will definitely say that.
For sure.
That kind of takes me right into my biggest win of the week. And it's in DFS, man. It has been a struggle over the last 5 to 6 weeks in DFS for me. I had a couple huge wins early in the season, and it just like the fantasy higher powers they will be. You get a couple great wins, great weeks, and then it's like follows up with 5 to 6 really bad weeks. But finally got back to my winning ways this week. 50% of the lineups that I played had Josh Allen with Puka. Every Josh Allen lineup, I had Puka coming back. Though really the main thing I didn't do with those is I didn't have a pass catcher for Buffalo. I just wanted to play Josh Allen naked. Right. And it worked out, obviously, with the 3 rushing touchdowns as well. But getting Khalil Shakir in there or Amari Cooper would have been nice as well. Yeah. But then Monday night, I take down the Monday Night Football game, take first place out of 100. Nice. Jamar Chase had the MVP, getting in Burrow and Dowdle, Chase Brown. I punted off with Tanner Hudson, who also got me like 2.5 points. So it worked out pretty well there. It's like I said, it's kind of been a tough middle of the season. So I was excited to get a couple big wins in DFS this week.
Nice.
That was nice.
That's got to be fun to watch when you're checking on your phone, right? The Josh Allen Puka Nacua combo.
that was pretty great. Literally I'm like looking at all of this about 2:00, looking to late swap because I have one Sam Darnold team with Justin Jefferson, no Jordan Addison, but everybody else has Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. So I'm like, well, I'm never going to catch any of these teams.
Right.
I'm like doing all this lay swap, and I got on a Romo Dunze, which was awesome in one of the Josh Allen plays. So It was very nice. Every time he scored another touchdown, I just pulled back up and looked like, okay, getting a little
All right.
closer, getting a little closer. So it
Nice.
didn't turn into anything crazy, but it was still got me back into the money with all those lineups. So that was fun.
Nice. My big wins of the week. I think I had Khalil Shakir as a start. We've already mentioned him a couple times now. I was really feeling he was going to find the end zone because he hadn't scored since week 3, and it was nice to finally get some kind of wide receiver 1 numbers instead of kind of being that really low floor or really safe floor guy that he's been all year. So that was fun to see. I had a league where I had Charbonnet and Garendo. That helps a lot. Obviously, they both. That's not really a big win though, because those guys were just kind of like you expected that, right? Like that; those were plug and play, pretty straightforward. So I guess my big win, aside from the Khalil Shakir one, would be I've been still trusting Brian Thomas Jr. for better or for worse, and the offense in Jacksonville is not exciting. I mean, it was a 10-6 game against the Titans, and yet he is still kind of being the main target share getter. He had 12 targets, he had 8 catches, 86 yards, and that's a really nice floor for wide receiver 1. I think he's wide receiver 10 or 11 on the year, if I'm not mistaken. And so I just really like what I'm seeing from him, and almost to the point where I'm kind of looking to next year. I know it's way too early to think next year, but I'm trying to, in my head, I'm starting to roll around the idea of for redraft leagues, at what point is Brian Thomas Jr. going to be drafted next year? If this kind of lackluster, pathetic offense in Jacksonville this year, if he's producing like this, what happens if there's a healthy Trevor Lawrence, if they have a new coach, if they have anything new and exciting in Jacksonville? Is he a second round pick? Like, is he an early second round, mid second round pick in redraft? Probably too early to discuss. I'm not going to open that can of worms quite yet, but I feel good about Brian Thomas Jr. And so I think in terms of how well his rookie campaign is going, I feel like he's been a big win. So especially last week.
Yeah, 3 straight games of double-digit points, fantasy points for him. To answer your question, I think he'll probably, if I was just putting money on it right now, I would bet the 4th or 6th round right
4
now.
6, yeah. Okay.
And mostly because he's not the big rookie wide receiver, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., anything like that, unless he goes on a crazy tear over the last couple weeks. But even Ladd McConkey has started to get more, more run right now as the rookie that's coming on late, those kind of things.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. has been super Mr. Consistent right now. And I do think he has a much higher ceiling than that. And maybe he's the Rashee Rice of next year, the guy that's why aren't we drafting this guy? Why are we taking him in the 6th round and not the 3rd round?
Right.
He could potentially be that.
Nice.
Real quick in the chat, Lee says he had 187 with Darnold starting. So that's the other thing. I had a buddy texting me, I think it was yesterday. I guess whatever. Yesterday, he lost in one of our leagues by 8 points. It was 209 to 201. And the next closest score was 180 in the league. It was just he's this is so frustrating.
Yes.
And he was already in the playoffs and whatnot, but I get it. You score that many points and you still lose. Very frustrating. There was a lot of that going on because there was so much scoring going on this past week. Yeah, Lee, we know. Yeah, Jacksonville for sure. I already said it once before. I think Doug Peterson is out on Black Monday. I don't think he survives past that day. I think there's one reason only that they're even keeping him there right now, and that's just to keep face, obviously, with the players and kind of just let it go. There's no real big point for them to make a big move right now as they're out of the playoffs and whatnot. So bring in an offensive-minded guy, somebody who can, that's who Doug Peterson was supposed to be, but
right.
Bring in an offensive-minded guy. I think that Brian Thomas Jr. could have a great sophomore campaign.
Yep.
All right, let's move to our biggest loss of the week. Josh, I'll let you start on this one.
Yikes. So speaking of Jacksonville, it's a good segue. They were supposed to be the matchup of the week for Will Levis. I considered starting him in a league.
And
I'm so glad I didn't, because I had Calvin Ridley in that league, who kind of had a salvaged round, and I still like Calvin Ridley because he gets all the targets. But man, Will Levis, I think under 10 fantasy points. I had it pulled up earlier. I don't quote me on that necessarily, but that's a huge loss because I think I advocated him as a starter on this show last week. So my apologies to anyone that took that.
That's just 40. That's just 40 less than Josh Allen had. What's wrong with that?
Right? No big deal. I also sat Chuba Hubbard. I saw the Jonathan Brooks increasing workload. I saw the Philadelphia matchup, and then got to be some of the worst news of the week injury wise for sure. Jonathan Brooks done again.
Terrible.
And I just can't imagine what that's like to get finally to the dream state where you're finally playing, and then to have that instantly, not like a few years and then another injury, but like 2 games. Like that sucks for him. But Chuba Hubbard then proved to us that he can be consistent even in that matchup. So that was at least good to see from a Chuba Hubbard standpoint. And then a cautionary tale, folks. My third loss. Apparently I had a lot of losses this week. My third loss is, Isaac Guerrero is a plug and play this week because of the offensive system as a running back. But just so you know, not all players are plug and play ready. Not all players can follow that. Not all teams can follow that mold. I did a late pivot off of George Pickens. I was like, why not Calvin Austin? Every time I see Pittsburgh in prime time, he seems to get a touchdown. I thought, if I can get 12 to 15 points from Calvin Austin, I'll feel pretty good. Feels like a savvy play. I believe he got me 1.2 PPR points. So, and there's a reason why he doesn't demand more targets probably. So even in a game without Pickens, so just a cautionary tale, just because a main guy's hurt doesn't mean next guy up is going to be great. You do want to look into that a little bit more. So that was another big loss. I didn't really preach Calvin Austin anywhere, so I think I only hurt myself in that regard, but yeah, definitely a loss that's worthy of note. So
yeah, I had looked at him. I might have even played him in a lineup on DFS because he was a cheap value play. Mm-hmm. No George Pickens. It's gonna flip everything on its head because George Pickens gets out I think it was 9:30. He's like, oh, they're not gonna play.
Right.
Doesn't do anything at all. So that was a rough there. Man, my start sits are down bad. Last week, holy cow. My apologies to all the people, the tens of thousands of you that are listening to our podcast. I was down bad. And my starts of the week did terrible. Cooper Rush has less than 15 points. Isaiah Pacheco didn't get the work that I expected him to be getting. Ends up outside the top 30. Jaden Reed, congratulations to you. You were right. You were right all along. I'm the idiot. Goose egg, man. A freaking goose egg.
I couldn't believe that. I didn't even predict that low. That was wild.
Freaking goose egg. I told you I won the Monday night. The Monday night EFS. I played the same contest as a 3 max, 100 people in it. $5, 125 up top. I played Jaden Reed in the MVP spot, got 100th place out of 100.
Oh,
what am I doing? Wow. Why do I like Jaden Reed so much? Can we get Romeo Doubs back on the football field for the Green Bay Packers, please? And then Will Disley gets hurt. You can't really take the loss on that, but still, when you add it to the other 3, it was just a really terrible week for me. So my starts were down bad. Let's jump in to some news. You kind of already mentioned it. The tough news of the week is obviously with Jonathan Brooks going down and tearing another ACL, just really, really bad. I had already kind of mentioned Isaac Guerrero. We're not really sure what's going to happen to him. If he doesn't play tomorrow night, what are your thoughts? Are there other guys that you're looking at? Would you play them? Anybody else on San Francisco? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, they claimed Israel Abanikanda, who's kind of a hot prospect rookie a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah, with the Jets.
Yep, Patrick. And, you think, well, he hasn't done anything. Well, he's winning with the Jets, so maybe, Shanahan and San Francisco can unlock him. But I think right now it's Patrick Taylor still above him on the depth chart. Sorry. And, he's got experience in the system. He's got some passing downs work already. I think you could do a lot worse than Patrick Taylor for sure. It's tough because it's a Thursday night matchup and it's going to sneak up on you. And if you don't get Guerrero, you have to trust Patrick Taylor, which stinks in the playoffs. But that's by that same token, if you follow the logic that got Guerrero here, right? It's San Francisco's starting running back. You're looking at probably 15 touches. They still won't have Trent Williams, so it's maybe not going to be the best offense, but you look at the Rams on a short week, they just gave up over 40 points to the Bills. Like, could very easily be a high-scoring game. Could be a dud. I mean, Thursday night's weird, but, if I'm loaded at running back, or if I have two studs at RB1, RB2, there's no buys this week, right? And I like my receivers at flex. I don't think you have to feel I don't have to feel compelled or required to start Patrick Taylor, but if you have a running back that's kind of hurt, or a running back that's a really tough matchup, you have Tyrone Tracy against the Ravens, you got Najee Harris against the Eagles. If your RB2 is someone that's got a really tough matchup, and you're looking at a 49ers guy that's going to get 16 touches, hopefully, I think you're in a spot where, I would consider, and I would definitely probably throw him in my running back spot. And then, worst case scenario, he gets you, 2 to 9 points, and you have to, but going into Sunday, at least if you're chasing upside, or if you can go with a safer floor type play. So, it's tough timing with the playoff starting on the Thursday night game like this, but I would feel perfectly comfortable starting Patrick Taylor. I'll say that, but depending on my lineup, I'm not starting him over my guys normally, right? I wouldn't put him above, I wouldn't put him in the top 12, or probably not even close to the top 15 necessarily, but I think I would consider Patrick Taylor like a low end RB2 this week if you need an exact ranking. But so I feel totally comfortable starting him, but if I can look elsewhere because I have a good setup, then I'm probably doing that first. But I don't know, it's tough.
Yeah.
Or hopefully, because it's hard, because Guerrero has not been ruled out, but he hasn't practiced all week, and the game's tomorrow, so it's not looking good.
It might just be worth, even in my situation, just even not to start Guerrero, because what you also don't want to happen, if you have a guy like I have Brian Robinson Jr., I could start instead. Guerrero's going to project better. Guerrero's going to have better touches, but if he's going into this thing injured, you just never really know what's going to happen there. And they could just have him active and still start Patrick Taylor. It's kind of a messy situation, but shout out to you, because you actually mentioned Patrick Taylor and Abanikanda a couple weeks ago, I believe, when Christian McCaffrey got hurt. So just as like that, you never know, keep him on your radar. Because here's the next guys up.
Yep.
And we might be seeing that tomorrow. A couple of guys showed up today on the practice reports, the injury reports. Trey McBride, he has a knee. It just says knee to me. Maybe you know more about it.
Nope, I don't.
Burrow. Both of those guys popped up questionable today. Yeah, Joe Burrow, questionable. I think Joe Burrow is questionable because I think he missed practice. Did you see this? He got robbed Monday night.
Yeah, he got robbed.
Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes got robbed when they were playing a Monday night football game, and the FBI traced it back to there's this ring of across the country doing this. I don't know if they've traced Joe Burrow's back to that as well, but they got a lot from both of those guys. So I don't know if Joe Burrow maybe just missed practice today because he was dealing with this or whatnot.
Right.
It didn't look like an injury thing for him, but just keep both those guys popped up. You just never like to see it on a Wednesday. Hopefully neither one of those are too big of issues.
Yep.
George Pickens still not practicing.
Yeah, George Pickens still's in practice. He's kind of been my wide receiver one, especially in our ADP league, because Chris Olave has been out for so long as well. So I've been relying on his kind of surge this year. But it's not looking good. But again, it's a Sunday game, so he could come back tomorrow and be fine. But I don't know. It's weird when they miss this many practice days in a row and they're not even limited to that extent. So yeah, George Pickens is one to monitor. Ken Walker's day to day. We talked about that a little bit earlier. The idea that it would be nice if they ruled him out just so we knew it was going to be Charbonnet instead of starting him, because kind of like you mentioned, when you have a guy that starts injured, but I had Bucky Irving last week. I've been big on Bucky Irving. He's a guy that's been kind of questionable week in, week out. He's been, battling through, managing pain, things that can't get worse. He's been playing through a lot of pain, but, last week his back tightened up. That's weird. It's hard to start him with confidence as well, because he's already got the questionable tag, And then Trey McBride is another one that popped up in the tight end position, which is very top heavy. You have 4 or 5 guys maybe that you really like, and then everybody else is kind of in the same boat. You don't like to see him pop up with a knee injury. I don't know what I didn't see much more than that, but even that shows up as questionable. So everything, of course, we overanalyze and we get over anxious about because it's the playoffs, but a lot to pay attention to, of course, as we go into the weekend.
Absolutely there. Lee says, why couldn't it be a good night for Debo tomorrow night? There is a 0% chance that I'm going into tomorrow night's DFS without at least one lineup with Debo Samuel in the MVP spot, because that's who Debo Samuel is. However, regular season, like I'm probably going to play him, like if you have him on your team. But my confidence in Debo Samuel right now is very, very low.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
very low. I thought last weekend was going to be I played him in a couple of lineups. So I thought this could be it. Everybody was playing Garindo because he was super cheap. So I faded him in a couple lineups and played Debo as leverage. Stupid. Like Debo's just not getting the touches that he used to get.
Yeah, I think if we had seen more consistent him in the running game, Lee, I think we'd be more excited. And you're right. Last week in Chicago, he had 5 carries only for 13 yards. But if you kind of feel like you're sensing they're going to give him the ball more now that Garendo's down and they're down to kind of their 4th, 5th string running back,
at some point it's got to be him, right?
you would think so, but still, that's a risk I'm not really willing to take in the playoffs. Kind of like you said, if it's regular season, I'm probably sure I'm throwing him in there. But we just, before the 5 carries last week, it's been 3 weeks since he had a carry, and then that game he only had 1. So if he was getting more of the rushing stuff that we've seen in the past, then I'd be more excited. But I don't know. With Juwan Jennings is a touchdown magnet from Purdy, and Kittle's been really good. So it's hard to get excited about Debo. But why couldn't it? Yeah, he could have a great night. I like your thought with DFS, getting him in some MVP lineups to capitalize if he goes off. But I'm going to be nervous about Debo for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's before we get to our start sits here, and don't worry, Lee, I know you've got a start sit in here, and we're gonna get to that. And anybody else in here, if you're following us on X, you can chat via X. Just click on the video itself. Then on the right side of your computer, it should show you, or if you're on your phone, should show you a chat feature. Throw your start sit question in the chat. If you're on Twitch, you're on YouTube, wherever you're watching us from, first, thank you. Facebook as well. Thank you for watching us. But throw it in the chat. We will answer your start sit questions. We are here to help you. But first, let's talk through a couple things. We had already kind of talked about our matchup coming up, but we're fantasy football players as well. People want to know, are we any good at the game that we talk about ourselves, right? So, Josh, I'll throw it to you first. Kind of talk through how are your playoffs looking? How'd your teams pan out this year, and how you feeling going into the playoffs?
Yeah, so I would say that if I could put a trend on what I did is I kind of went opposite of 0 RB, if that makes sense. Like I drafted probably more running backs than what it felt like people were doing. I felt like wide receivers were going very, very early and higher than they maybe would have, just because, and rightfully so, it was the right logic because you have running backs by committees on every team, right? Every team is splitting carries between guys. It's very hard to get a Derrick Henry or a Saquon Barkley who's going to command pretty much all the touches out of the backfield. And so, but I hit the young running backs pretty well. Like Tyrone Tracy in a bunch of leagues has been really solid. Bucky Irving has been really solid. Devon Achane has been one of my stalwarts in a league of mine. So I kind of leaned running back a little bit, trying to find the guys that get the volume. And of course you sacrifice a little, but you guys saw my roster in ADP, right? Going into the playoffs and starting Khalil Shakir and Xavier Legette right now on my, at my wide receiver positions isn't exactly exciting. And so there was definitely a trade-off there, but yeah, Tyrone Tracy's a big one. Bucky Irving, Devon Achane. I was very high on Trey McBride, and that kind of hit for sure. Except again in this league where I went with Sam Laporta. I think I've referenced that every single show. Just like, I could have avoided him and gotten Trey McBride the nenext round, and I went against my guns. Trey
McBride needs to score a freaking touchdown. Let's
be
be
nice.
honest.
Yeah.
His season would be a heck of a lot better if he just had a couple touchdowns.
Yeah.
But it's still really, really good.
Right. His 2 touchdowns this year, I'm pretty sure, are a fumble recovery touchdown that he fell on in the end zone, and then a rushing touchdown in a weird setup. So, you know, and then I mentioned Brian Thomas Jr. I've been kind of sticking with, and George Pickens I was pretty high on, and it took him a while for sure. It took Russell Wilson taking over, but I think Pickens has kind of turned into the wide receiver one that we were all hoping he could be. You know, you wish he was on a better offense, but then the trade-off is he doesn't have any target competition really, and that's really nice going into a week, being able to set your lineup and putting Pickens out there, knowing that, yeah, he might get a touchdown vulture by like a Calvin Austin or something like that, but other than that, he's the main target getter, and he gets a lot of deep balls. So George Pickens has been a good one. In terms of how my leagues did, I think I'm like 1 or 2 for 3 or 4 in my best ball leagues. I have a few that I kind of maybe veered off in terms of paying attention to. They kind of died off early, so due to injury. But I got one best ball league for sure in the playoffs that I'm following, and then I have our ADP one, and then my winning in the other one. So I got about 3 or 4 teams into playoff fantasy football right now. It's really fun because I've been on the other side of it as well, where you are where you're out long before this. But yeah, just some of the guys I named have kind of been the all-stars of what I've had. And then Chuba Hubbard's the last one. I was really down on him and kind of lucked in. And I just can be more happy with how he's performed. So I'm hoping he gets me a few more now that Jonathan Brooks is out again, and we know there's no competition there. Hopefully you can get a few more nice performances for me and lead me to some championships. But it's definitely fun to still have a few leagues going right now. And then DFS, I'm kind of like you were saying, in the middle of the year, some ruts, not winning a whole lot. I've done a lot of winning a little bit, you know, winning enough to get your bet back and things like that, but nothing major. So still a work in progress, but I do more of that when the playoffs come around anyway. So,
oh yeah, best time to do it.
Oh yeah,
best time to do it indeed. Yeah, I made playoffs in 4 of my 5 redrafts and 4 of my 5 dynasties. So
nice.
Feeling good there. My biggest win of the entire season is just Jamar Chase. Literally, I didn't realize how often I drafted him. I know I have him a lot in dynasty, so that kind of helps.
Right.
But even in one of my redraft leagues, I have Jamar Chase. Like, it's just, he has been phenomenal. Obviously, Joe Burrow, I stack him in Joe Burrow in 2 of my leagues. So That's been fun. So those guys have been helping me out quite a bit. Devon A-Chain has been a go-to guy for me this year.
Nice.
And then Jaden Daniels, right? Like I've kind of talked about that before. Like pretty much either I took Kyler and Jaden Daniels, or I didn't take a quarterback. I just took Jaden Daniels. So and that has worked out for me all over the place. Rico Dowdle starting to come on a little bit as a 0 RB guy. So I've enjoyed some of that. So been having fun. Now for best ball. Oh baby. My best ball teams. I drafted 98 teams. I don't know why I didn't get to 100.
Wow.
It bothers me still that I didn't get to 100. Like, I know why, because I was actually at 95, and then I did 3 resurrections, and I didn't have any time to do more, and so it ends up at 98.
95. That's impressive.
So, 15 best ball manias. That's the big dog, and I got one of those through. It's a Baltimore Cincinnati stack. I got Lamar and Joe Burrow on there.
Ooh.
Jamar Chase.
Is it super flex?
Obviously great.
Is
No, it is not. Okay. It is not. I got Joe Burrow later. I went ahead and took him. I already had Jamar Chase. I took Jamar Chase first.
Nice.
Went 0 RB. I got Stevenson, Dowdle. Algier has given me some weeks. Cam Akers has scored a couple of times this year. Justice Hill. My running backs are not like something you just love, but Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Keon Coleman, Wicks, Jalen Tolbert's giving me some weeks. So
nice.
Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts. So it is through. to the playoffs. It's my only one of 15
Okay.
of the Best Ball Mania stuff. Best Ball Mania, 672,000 entries, and number one gets the 1.5 million. So I am still live to quit my
Wow.
job. However, I'm not going to buy anything today. I'll wait,
Oh, wait.
So, with best ball, these big tournaments, they're a lot of fun, but the first 14 weeks is just one tournament. And now you end up essentially, you're putting a random pot of 12.
Right.
And you just have to have the best team out of these 12, 16 maybe even actually.
Okay.
Random pot of 16 teams.
Do you have to win?
You got to win it.
First, you have to. Okay, I was just gonna say, do they let like the top 4 through further or no?
No, it's definitely not the top 4. So out of the 12 that you draft with, they take the top 2 from the first 14 weeks, and then I believe they take just the top 1. Maybe they take top 2, but I think it's just top 1 each week moving forward. So. Come on, Jamar Chase. Come on, Lamar Jackson. Let's just score as much points. Rico Dowdle against the Carolina Panthers.
Oh, yeah.
I'll take it all this week.
It's a good matchup.
Yeah, exactly. I'm about to talk about him in starts and sits of the week. Let's jump into that. We already got a question here from Lee. Darnold or Nix before we get into quarterbacks of our own. Sam Darnold or Bo Nix this week?
I am going to lean my guy, Sam Darnold. I don't expect 5 touchdowns again from him this week, but we get the Bears at home this week, and their defense has not been as good as we thought they would. And I think we could definitely exploit that a little bit. The Broncos get the Colts in kind of like a AFC wildcard showdown, and I'm kind of envisioning a lower scored game there personally. I think the Colts are a little bit better defensively than they get credit for sometimes. And so unless you're really chasing some of those rushing touchdowns, which I think Bo Nix offers you, obviously Sam Darnold doesn't, then I think you could maybe entertain the idea of Nix, but I'm pretty confident in Darnold here over Nix personally.
Yeah, I don't mind Sam Darnold. I like Bo Nix's rushing upside he's got, but we haven't really seen it over the last 4 to 5 weeks. So he's not really utilizing the rushing upside. So I can't say you should expect that, right? Mm-hmm. So I like that too. I think Sam Darnold there. This run game, while the Bears' run defense is pretty weak, they're actually more of a run funnel than a pass funnel. This run game is just not really there right now. I kind of talked about Aaron Jones a couple weeks ago, but it's just not really there right now. So they're going to put it in Sam Darnold's hands, and they still got to win. I mean, this is a big week for playoff matchups. You already kind of mentioned it with Colts, Broncos. We've got Bills, Lions, both teams trying to be the 1 seed in their respective divisions. Steelers, Eagles, both trying to hang. I mean, this is a huge playoff implication week. And then you got games like, I guess the Rams 49ers even Thursday night. And but then you got games like the Ravens, who are 16-point favorites against the New York Football Giants. So you got to love that. So, we're both on the Sam Darnold train against Bo Nix. I will get us started here at quarterback. I kind of mentioned it a couple times already. We're trying to find situations here where teams have something to play for. I just reeled off a couple matchups for playoff implications. One I didn't mention, Houston Texans versus Miami Dolphins. Again, Miami is technically still in this wild card race, and they want to stay in the wild card race. The Houston Texans are still in a race for the AFC South. Mm-hmm. They're only a 2-game lead. If the Colts can beat the Broncos this weekend and the Texans were to lose, you're looking at, a game. I think it's actually kind of 2 because I think Houston owns the tiebreaker, but still the fact is both these teams are going to be gunning for a win. Stroud's been a bust this year. No doubt about it. We all know he has been less than stellar, less than the 6th overall quarterback drafted, whatever it is. But if you've been streaming quarterbacks, or maybe you just haven't been playing him like I haven't been in one of my leagues, this is the week I think that we can go right back to CJ Stroud. I think Nico's back and healthy. They're coming off a bye week. I really expect this offense to start getting into it a little bit more and throwing a little bit more with a healthy Nico Collins. I have been sitting CJ Stroud in a league, literally played Will Levis last week. It's a 2-week playoff league. I won the game. I now am going to be starting CJ Stroud this week. I haven't started him in a couple weeks. He'll be my starter this week. And I'll also be starting him over a guy like Baker Mayfield this week. Baker been the complete opposite of Stroud. He's been the wonder boy at the top of the leaderboards for quarterbacks, being in the top 10 week after week. But now facing a Los Angeles Chargers team, they are just tough against quarterbacks. Really, they're tough against offenses in general and not giving up many fantasy points all around. And I just don't expect them to give up a bunch of fantasy points to Baker Mayfield this week and hold him under his season average.
Yep. I think those are fair points. And you know, Baker's had a lot of good weeks, and he's been a really good overall quarterback. But they're running the ball really well in Tampa Bay. And like you said, the Chargers defense is the main reason for this matchup. You know, there's still no Chris Godwin. Some people are kind of thinking maybe that's part of why it's not as productive. So yeah, I can get on board with that for sure. And I really root for Stroud too. I'm hoping, you know, that Dolphins Texans game could be a high scoring one. So the Dolphins are humming pretty well right now too. So,
how do we get two shitty Monday Night Football games? No offense to your Vikings. Because they're just gonna wipe the floor at the Bears.
Hey, don't jinx us.
we have all these playoff matchups. Are we not flexing games yet?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, what is it?
All these matchups that we have this week,
and we Vikings, get Bears, and
the Falcons versus the Raiders.
Oh, yeah. The Desmond
we
Ritter
might get
Raiders.
Desmond Ritter versus Michael Penix Jr.
The Desmond Raiders.
The Desmond Raiders. Desmond Ritter revenge game against the Falcons.
Oh,
you gotta put that on ESPN.
That storyline screams prime time. Are you kidding me?
Sorry.
That's all right.
Go on. I'll get off my soapbox.
My first word in my notes for quarterbacks is UG. I just, it's kind of, they remind me of the tight ends. There's some elite guys that you love. And then there's such a big pile of murkiness that yeah, you kind of have to go with your gut, go with the matchup, go with these things that you think are going to help that week in particular. And so I'm starting a guy that you're probably starting, but if you have a couple quarterbacks, you may have sat him recently and you may be nervous, and that is Kyler Murray. You know, he had 18 points, I think, against Seattle last week against a tough defense, but Seattle owned that game. And so he got you know, it didn't look particularly fantastic, but the Cardinals get the Patriots, and that's one of my favorite matchups of the week for fantasy, especially for the Cardinals guys. That's why I'm really hoping Trey McBride is still playing at full strength, because the Cardinals need a win, and I think this should be a big one for them. The Patriots have given up in the last 3 weeks 24, 36, and 35 fantasy points to quarterbacks, and so I think this could be a nice big game for Kyler Murray as you start your playoffs. So he's kind of he's on the fringe. You'd still probably consider him a QB1. Whatever place you use for rankings. But I think you can start him with confidence, unless you have also, you know, one of those top guys, and like Jaden Daniels for example. Like, I think that's your situation, Trevor, right? Like I would still probably go Jaden Daniels there as well. But Kyler's matchup looks good. My sit is this. I'm taking this personally now. I have a league where I've been trusting Justin Herbert because Anthony Richardson has been struggling, and Russell Wilson I still don't necessarily trust. And I was envisioning this epic Chargers-Chiefs shootout where Herbert threw for tons of yards and touchdowns last week. And he's just not taking advantage of matchups. His best week recently was 24 points, but that was against the Bengals. Like, he didn't even take full advantage there, I don't feel like. And so he has a golden matchup again. The Bucs are 32nd against quarterbacks. Antoine Winfield Jr. is out in the Bucs defensive backfield. This screams monster game from Justin Herbert, but I am so scared, and I've taken it so personally that I am going to find it hard for me to start him. And it's weird because, again, it's kind of against conventional wisdom here, but the Chargers like to run the ball. They're winning with really good defense. They haven't played in a lot of games where they score more than 20 points, right? So there's just not that many points to be had, even though Herbert, I think, is a really good quarterback. And, of course, he's got the Q next to his name again. This guy He's a tough player. Believe me, I respect him. Respect the hell out of him as a football player. But there's something about him playing hurt, like if he's not scrambling as much, things like that. So I don't know what's going on there. But my first round of the playoffs, I have a dilemma. I'm considering going back to Anthony Richardson in one league and just hoping for that upside, even though he's got the Broncos. Because again, it's setting up too perfectly. It's kind of against conventional wisdom because Herbert has the 32nd ranked team against quarterbacks. Like this should be a smash start for Herbert. But, he had a piddly 14, 15 points last week against the Chiefs who'd been giving up a decent amount in the passing game. So I don't like it. And again, I think on this show a few weeks ago, I was talking about playoff matchups and how Herbert had a nice schedule, and I was expecting him to keep ascending, and then he just didn't do it. He had the Ravens in there, the Bengals in there, like teams where he should start taking off if he's that talent that we think. And there's just something going on that's capping his production, and I don't like it. I don't fully know what it is, and so I'm very scared of Herbert this week, even in a golden matchup, I would say. So
my main rebuttal here is I wouldn't put too much stock in the Chiefs game. It's a divisional game, a lot on the line in Arrowhead. Spags threw the freaking kitchen sink at him. Like he was mixing it up. No Lad McConkey. I think that's important for Justin Herbert right now. Because after Lad McConkey, he's throwing to Quentin Johnston and Joshua Palmer. Joshua Palmer has been a wide receiver 3 for years. And we thought it was because he was behind Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, but I think now he's behind Quentin Johnston and Lad McConkey. Like he's a good wide receiver 3, but that's what he is, right? They were not really getting much separation. Quentin Johnston gets the touchdown, so I think he finally kind of looks good for fantasy, but it wasn't like he played out of his mind by any rate. And then he loses Will Disley.
Right.
And then he takes an elbow to the thigh and can hardly walk for a minute, right? So, I think a lot of things went wrong for him, but he missed practice this week, right? He missed practice. He's got this thigh contusion is what they're calling it. Right. He's got an ankle issue going on as well. So I don't disagree that he could be sat this week. But if Vlad McConkey is back and he gets a full practice in Friday, there's no way I would sit him unless I've got, obviously one of the guys. But if we're talking about some of these other guys, Baker on the other side, I'd even start Justin Herbert over my start of the week probably. Anthony Richardson against Denver, I would probably start a full participant in practice with Lad McConkey, Justin Herbert. So I think that right now on Wednesday, definitely not going to start him.
Right.
But my only thing would be check the news as the week goes on to see if it potentially gets a little bit more positive for him. Because right now you are not wrong. There is nothing going right for Justin Herbert.
I think the Lad McConkey point is helping sway what I've been taking personally, though. I think for sure. I knew he was out last week. I didn't really think of it, but when you don't have your safety blanket, receiver that moves the chains and extends drives that well, I think that's a good point for sure. For sure.
All right, let's move on to running back. If you're in the chat, now's the time. We're already at running back. We only got 3 positions left. We will be out of here after tight end. So if you have start-sit questions that you're sitting on before week 15, round 1 of the fantasy football playoffs, throw them in the chat right now. Josh, give us your start-sit for running backs.
So I cheated a little bit here, Trevor. I have 4 names for you because I have 2 starts, 2 sits, and they're all it's all very murky. So I'm going to preface this by saying it's hard for me to have confidence here because the guys I want to start have really tough matchups, and the guys I don't want to start have better matchups, and there's some better situations kind of deal. A guy that I've probably been higher on than everyone all year is Ramondre Stevenson with the volume, and he has not done anything to be super exciting. So this is your safe play. Again, your safe flex option. Don't start him as your RB2. I'm not saying that. Arizona's got a pretty good defense, but they've been pretty susceptible against the run as well. So they haven't exactly shut that down. Ramondre was RB21 before the bye in week 13. So he's putting up low end RB2 numbers. So again, I think he's a safe floor guy for your flex. That's how I'm thinking of Ramondre. I also, you talked about that stellar matchup on Monday night, Falcons Raiders. Sincere McCormick is officially the starter. Maybe this is just the reminder that McCormick is officially the starter. Zamir White's out for the season. Alexander Madison's battling injury. Amir Abdullah is basically a pass catching back on certain downs, right? Sincere McCormick's averaged over 5 yards a carry in his past 2 matchups. He's looked pretty good. If you're worried about Desmond Ridder, though, leading this offense, which I am, I think I have McCormick in our ADP league. I picked him up, and I'm not, again, a little bit murky here. I'm not starting him 100%, but I do kind of like the matchup against the Falcons. If this Raiders offense can move the ball at all, I think McCormick's in for a pretty decent game as an RB2 as well. So I like those names. My 2 sits, I hate these. I hate these sits, and I might have to start them in certain leagues. But Najee Harris has the Eagles this week, and Tyrone Tracy has the Ravens, and these matchups are ones we don't really like. You're looking for Najee Harris. If you're thinking about starting him, you're looking that Chuba Hubbard had a pretty decent game last week, and Carolina kept it close, so it wasn't a complete shutdown job by the Eagles. But Tyrone Tracy, he's been my guy all year, but this Giants offense just isn't doing it right now. Tyrone Tracy was RB11 last week. So again, you're saying, well, why are you mad at your guy? He was RB11. He was an RB1, but he had a touchdown that helped him. He had some catches that helped him. He averaged 2.8 yards a carry. And so it's just not looking very good. And what's that?
He's not efficient at all.
No, not at all. And so as much as I love him from a logical fantasy standpoint, putting that level of efficiency with Tommy DeVito against the Ravens, it just doesn't sound like a recipe for playoff success in fantasy. And so I'm trying to go counteract my biases about him. And then, the other thing about Najee I forgot to mention is he had 0 targets again last week. And so with Najee Harris, he's had weeks where he's had 4 or 5 catches, but he's also had weeks where he doesn't get targeted at all. And in those weeks, he's getting a good solid 15, 16 carries. But again, just the efficiency isn't there, and the offense isn't quite as explosive as you want for something to feel good about, right? So again, I just gave you 4 names. They're all kind of somewhere near where you're going to maybe need to start them, especially at RB2/flex. So take that for what it's worth. But especially matchup for Najee Harris, Tyrone Tracy, I'm very worried this week for those guys. So
you had kind of mentioned Sincere McCormick. I saw this earlier today from Coach Speak Index. If you are a fantasy football player on Twitter and you don't follow Coach Speak Index, you should just go follow him. Right now, he's been phenomenal this year. He takes essentially what the coaches say, and then he just says whether or not they're actually reliable. Okay. Quoted Antonio Pierce about whether or not Sincere McCormick should be the RB1. Says, yep, he deserved it. Last week he was running his tail off, so keep running. Keep pushing those numbers up. See if we can get to 100. Pierce has an 80% reliability on the depth chart, according to Coach Speak. So he is the RB1, is what everybody's saying right now. Should be the clear RB1. And just the idea that Antonio Pierce is saying, run it up, get him to 100, get it to – like, you just don't know how many touches this kid could actually take on this week. Like, he might take on 20. So love that for Sincere McCormick. And then I just needed to pull this up one more time because, Josh, right now, early in the week, your 2 starts of the week are sitting right here on this bench of yours.
I know.
Right here, Sincere McCormick, Ramondre, and your sit of the week, Tyrone Tracy. You got some decisions to be made this week.
I know. That's why, listen, I want everyone who watches ADP. I appreciate everyone that's here every week. Lee, anyone else that's ever chimed in. This is me trying to show conventional wisdom, but again, I'm liable to go with my gut, and I might just love Tyrone Tracy too much and consider him, or maybe I'm hoping it's going to be a Ravens blowout. And I might
You're like, maybe if I speak it into existence, if I say sit him, he'll go off. So I better start him.
Right. And again, kind of what I mentioned, like Sincere McCormick's been great, but now Desmond Ritter's in at quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Ramondre Stevenson's safe, but if I'm going to the playoffs, I'm going against some of the better teams in my league. So maybe safe isn't good enough. And that's why, it's the inner turmoil of my head. That's why I gave you 4 names, and they're all very close on my list. So
I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and that's what everybody's going to be going through this week.
Yeah,
with a lot of start-sit situations for sure. Just had to throw that out there for you.
Exposed. I'm exposed.
Exactly. No. You still got time to switch it up.
That's right.
Maybe I want you to, play Sincere.
Yeah, these are mind games. These are mind games.
Look what Antonio Pierce said. Coach Speak Index says he has an 80% reliability rating. You should be playing Sincere McCormick.
That's right.
My start of the week is a little bit easier, I think. I'm going to go Rico Dowdle. If you're not starting him at this point, one of two things is true. You're stacked at the running back position, or you're just not paying attention to the Dallas Cowboys and Rico Dowdle, who has played 70% of the snaps in 2 straight weeks. He was pushing 80% of the snaps this past week. He looks great running the ball. He looks explosive. They're finally just giving it to Rico Dowdle, what we've been hoping for all season. We're finally starting to see over the last couple weeks, since week 9, when he came back from his injury, the bye week in week 7, he missed week 8. Since week 9, he's been RB12 in total points scored. I just really like Rico Dowdle, and he is in my starting lineup for the ADP league. Mm-hmm. For me here, the sit of the week is a really tough sit of the week. But I think we really need to think hard and long about sitting Jonathan Taylor. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Over his last 6 weeks, he's had finishes of 9, 12, and 11. You'll love to see that. He's also had finishes of 37, 28, and 35. But the real kicker in this situation is the great games, Houston, Buffalo, New England. Teams that are not great against the run. Buffalo is really bad against run. If you might think a lot of great things about Buffalo, they cannot stop the run. New England's a bad football team, bad defense. It's just these teams don't stop the run. The bad weeks, these weeks 37, 28, 35, Minnesota, great run defense. Detroit, maybe the best run defense. And the Jets, really good run defense, although everything else is in turmoil. Mm-hmm. When he is facing good run defenses, he is failing. This week, he faces the Denver Broncos, a top 10 run defense. It's going to be hard. It's week 15, and I'm telling you to sit Jonathan freaking Taylor, one of the best actual running backs in the football league. But it's a great run defense. And you kind of mentioned earlier, it could just be like a slugfest. And maybe he falls into the end zone and gets a top 24, but Richardson's back as well. He'll take some of those goal line opportunities away from him. Yep. If you have options, I think that you should seriously consider sitting Jonathan Taylor this week.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. It feels weird, because if you get the playoffs and he's one of your guys, he probably started most of the year for you. But I think that's pretty telling when he's up against a good defense versus a bad defense. Those finishes on the week are that's a huge disparity. When you go from a RB1 finish to an RB3 finish, like that's you can't really ignore that from that sample size. So that's a good point. And I was going to mention when you brought up Dowdle, I was a little bit I was less convinced about Dowdle than you were after the Thanksgiving game that we both were feeling good about. But I'm fully convinced now too. It took me longer to get on board, but he looks good too. He looks like he's running well, and I think that Dallas is going to keep feeding him for the rest of the season. So I think that's
my one best ball mania team that got in, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, Rico Dowdle, all going on Monday night. I was like in 6th place, but I knew I was within shot because I had no quarterback points yet. Just catapulted into 2nd place.
That's awesome.
All 3 of those guys just going off. Speaking of best ball, Lee says in the chat, talks about his best ball teams. I'm not going to read all the names here, but essentially he's got the big dog, Derrick Henry here. He's got, Jefferson, Kittle, some big time names here.
Njoku at tight end, that was a nice pick.
Njoku, yeah.
Njoku's been huge.
He got in with 3.6 points with Mahomes only quarterback. Yeah, I had a couple teams that had a chance. They were around the advanced line, but no quarterbacks for this week. You know, whether it was Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Lamar Jackson, a lot of quarterbacks out last week. So at least you had the one there. And I just don't really pay that much attention to bye weeks. Everybody's going to have one, you know, and so it was kind of tough, though, when it was the last week of the season.
Well, it's one thing to have some teams with a bye at week 14, but we had 6 teams with legitimate fantasy guys on bye week 14. That's kind of intense, right?
Yeah, for sure. And if this would have happened in week 6 and I didn't have any quarterbacks, I would have had no idea because I'm not looking at my best ball teams at that point in time.
Right.
But week 14, I'm checking all of them to see if I got a chance. And then I see I have no quarterbacks. I'm like, damn. All right, let's go into wide receiver here. I will get us started with DK Metcalf, kind of a frustrating wide receiver on the year. He's not really giving us those explosion games that we're used to in the past. And JSN kind of is. He's a top 10 wide receiver on the year. So that's also a little bit frustrating. You draft DK 3-4 rounds ahead of JSN. But the targets are still there. The usage, the underlying metrics, everything is still there for DK Metcalf. 9 targets this past week. Facing a Green Bay Packers defense this week, middle of the pack against the pass. Nothing special, nothing you're necessarily worried about here. Another great playoff matchup that both teams really need to win. And I think they're going to find ways to get it to DK Metcalf.
He's one of those guys too that you see. And again, this isn't exactly statistically something I can prove right off the top of my head right now, but he's one of those guys that will have a play called back, will be open deep and get overthrown. It feels, I'm fairly confident if I were to find time to dig into the numbers that sort of stuff happens to him more than other receivers by a little bit. Again, not great analysis.
Him and Nico Collins, those two guys this year, I feel like every time they're doing something great, something goes wrong.
Exactly. So I think there's a little bit of element with him to that too, where if some of those things go his way or don't hinder him, then he's got an extra 50 yards and a touchdown in some of these games, and we're talking about him a little bit differently. So
yeah, that's a really great point. Hopefully regression is positive for him this week. I'm going to sit Jacoby Myers. He's been a guy that we've kind of been talking about starting week over week. He's been a great value in daily fantasy. He's got a juicy matchup against this Atlanta Falcons team. We talked about Sam Darnold throwing 5 touchdown passes against this same Atlanta Falcons team just last week. When you log in or you go to set your lineup, you're going to see a green number right beside Myers, or Atlanta's going to be in the green, whatever the case is, depending on the app that you use. That's going to indicate that Atlanta's a great matchup for Jacoby Myers, and it's going to be easy. Be like, all right, cool, great matchup. I'm going to put him in because it is a great matchup. But it's Desmond Ridder. That's the quarterback. Aiden O'Connell's not there anymore. Gardner Minshew's not going to be there anymore. Both guys injured. Maybe it's not Desmond Ridder. I assume it's Desmond Ridder. I keep saying it's going to be him. I don't know if they've officially said it, but I don't know who else they have on this team. And there's no way I'm rolling out in round 1 of the fantasy football playoffs trusting that Desmond Ridder is going to get it done on Monday Night Football. So I just got to sit. If I can, I'm going to have to sit Jacoby Myers.
Yep, I think that's fair. I'm trying to see if we can confirm that he is starting, but it's all that stuff like he's preparing as if he's going to be the starter and things like that. So all signs are pointing to Desmond Ridder, even if it hasn't been said officially. So yeah, I'm with you there. I don't want to trust too much to that offense. And again, part of the reason why I'm not catapulting Sincere McCormick into my starting lineup, right? It would be a little bit of a different story for sure if they were with Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew. For my wide receiver starts and sit, my start is a guy that I tried to get in one of my leagues and I could not get him and that was Adam Thielen. The 34-year-old Adam Thielen with Carolina is coming off, or he's had 21 targets in his past 2 games, and nearly 100 yards in both. There's one fear is that Jalen Coker has been out for a couple of games, and he was kind of operating out of the slot for the Panthers, and he's got a full bill of practice today, and he's coming back. But I just think that Adam Thielen, with his experience and the way he's kind of gelling with Bryce Young, I feel like there's a connection here. And I was ready to try to pick him up and throw him in, and I was not able to get him in the one league where he's still on the waiver wire. And so it was a bummer because I think he's going to have a really solid week. And so I'm still feeling good about Adam Thielen. The Panthers have the Cowboys. Cowboys have a really depleted secondary. I think they lost another guy. I can't forget which one, but they lost another player in the Bengals game last week. There is yards to be had. So unless they get home to Bryce Young, if they find a way to pressure him consistently, I think that, your Carolina Panthers skill position players, I think, are all in play here this week, which is why I'm for sure starting Chuba Hubbard and considering Leggett right now. But Adam Thielen for sure is one that I would like to start if I can. And then my sit, we kind of talked about him earlier, and I think you have him on your bench already in our matchup, and that is Devontae Smith for the Philadelphia Eagles. They get a real tough matchup with the Steelers this week. Jalen Hurts only averaging about 25 pass attempts per game. They're just not throwing the ball, and he's not the first option when they do anyway, right? It's going to A.J. Brown. Calcaterra is getting touchdowns. Devontae Smith had like 13.7 points because he got into the end zone last week. Before that, he didn't even get over 10 for the past couple weeks. Like, it's not prolific enough of an offense to begin with. I mean, and they had the Panthers last week, so it's not like they had, it's not like they've been going up against the world's toughest matchups. And this week they get the Steelers. With Devontae Smith, the talent level's there, and so you're always going to feel bad if he hits a 60-yard touchdown. That's definitely a possibility in any game that the Eagles are in. But the way things are trending right now, I don't know if I feel comfortable starting Devontae Smith in my playoff roster, and that's crazy to me because at the beginning of the year I would have said A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith are set and forget all season except for their bye week. Like that. That's a wide receiver duo that should be able to produce both those guys. It's just not happening right now for Smith. So,
yeah, I was looking at the Eagles. I mean, less than 20 targets total, 17. I mean, over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah,
they don't have 20 targets as a team over the last 3 weeks. Like that, there's no volume,
right?
And he doesn't have the A.J. Brown like explosion in him.
Right.
He can have great games, but he's going to have to do it off volume and catching a touchdown pass. A.J. Brown could take, 2 catches to the house in a hurry, and it's like, wow, that was amazing. You know what I mean? So I'm sitting in right now, and I could play him in ADP. I would have to sit one of my running backs and put him in the flex, but I'm just not necessarily willing to do that right now.
Right.
So,
right. Yep.
Lee has a good question here about Brock Bowers. Obviously, we've been talking pretty poorly about this Las Vegas team, but no, like Brock Bowers is Brock Bowers. Like, he is the guy. He is the best tight end in the league in fantasy. He is a monster. And with these young, terrible quarterbacks, they want to throw to their tight end who's like literally right in front of them, right?
Yeah.
5 yards, a hitch route. I just want to throw it to this guy. So I would not be sitting Brock Bowers.
I think
can't do that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people before the season started, it was kind of like, regardless of who drafts him, he's probably going to be matchup proof, and it didn't take long for him to prove that as well. So I think, Brock Bowers is in that top tier of 3 or 4 guys that you start at tight end, regardless of matchup. You start every week, and he's your best option, and he's number 1 of that elite tier, I think, right now in fantasy. So yeah, I think you start Bowers still. I'm trying to think of a realm in which you don't. I mean, I guess you could consider, like, if you somehow have Bowers and Trey McBride, sure, you could go Trey McBride over the Patriots, but against the Patriots. But I mean, outside of having 2 of like the best guys, I'm not sure I'm not sitting Bowers, even though I'm definitely disappointed for sure. I'm worried that the volume isn't going to quite be there and the touchdowns won't be as possible, but I'm not sitting Brock Bowers either. I agree.
Yeah, not necessarily gonna want to go that far with the Las Vegas Raider hate.
Yep.
All right. Speaking of tight ends, let's
Yes.
talk through our starts and sits for tight ends this week.
Yes. So I am officially going to live and die in our league with Sam Laporta, who I'm starting him at tight end, and you probably were ours or we're planning on as well. You know, he's been getting some touchdowns recently. My favorite part, he's got past 4 games as targets. He's had 7, 6, 6, and 6. And I think we've talked about before, 6 targets for a tight end is kind of a good, it's a good baseline. If you can get to 6 targets consistently, that means you're probably going to get to about at least 4 catches, at least 50 yards. And for a tight end, that's a decent game, right? But more importantly, because I think that his floor is decent. I mean, he had 6 for 50 or 5 for 50 last week. This Lions-Bills game, I think there's going to be a lot of points to be had.
Yeah.
And so I'm picturing maybe a touchdown from Laporta. I'm picturing a 25-yard catch and run over the middle to start the game. Like just little things like that I think his points are going to add up. So again, you're probably already starting Laporta if you're at this point, unless again, depends on who you have on your roster. But I'm not having as many reservations as we've had. I mean, he's a guy we've talked about, definitely a bust based on where you drafted him. So that's still true. There definitely been weeks where if you sat him, you felt good, but I think playoff time, you go with your studs. And I think this matchup is good for the Lions offense. And it's good for him against the Bills. And then
that total has already been bet up to 53.5.
Ooh.
That would be, I think 53.5 is like the highest total, a closing total of a game in the last couple of years. Like we don't see this high of totals anymore these days. So that's,
Yep.
And
I like
there's a lot of really smart people who make a lot of money on betting out there. And if the total is rising to 53.5, you like that. The other point I'll just add to your start Sam Laporta point is he has at least 10 points in 5 of his last 8 games.
Mm-hmm.
So he's getting you double-digit points, even if it's 5 for 50. Like he's getting it. He's been a little bit more consistent towards the back half of the season than he was the first couple weeks.
And then, of course, you can also factor in if you like to play this game, you look at that high point total, Dan Campbell's not going to want to settle for field goals. Are you kidding me? Yep. Field goals don't beat Josh Allen. So if it's 4th and 3, if it's 4th and 6, they're going to look for Laporta to move the chain. That's
there's 45 seconds left on the clock. He's going for it.
Right, exactly. Yep.
I want to see if he does that shit in the playoffs.
I mean,
I don't think it was the right move. I don't think going for it was the right move in that situation. I understand why he wanted to. I understand why he did it, but I don't think it was the right move. I mean, they were successful, so it was the right move, but I don't think it was the actual right move to go for there. You kick your field goal, and you play defense. Like there's 45 seconds left.
Yep.
Sorry.
You should trust your defense. You should trust your defense a little bit, right?
Yeah. No kidding.
My sit is a guy that I always pay attention to who I talk about on here in case I need to kind of backtrack or change opinions on things a little bit here. But I know Pat Freiermuth, I really liked. He was blossoming into a target for Russ that had been pretty consistent, and he hasn't been bad, and that's why you might be still considering him. But again, if you are not in the top, if you don't have one of the top 3 tight ends, you're looking in this huge mass of guys, and Philadelphia has been really, really good against tight ends. They've given up 4 touchdowns all year to tight ends. And even if George Pickens is out, I just don't know how this passing game is going to look against Philadelphia. I don't think it's going to be super prolific, and I think it's just too risky for me. And again, I'm going into the playoffs. I'm looking at, I need to score a lot of points to go against a team that also made it to the playoffs who scores a lot of points. And Pat Freiermuth getting me 9 points is not something I'm going to be looking forward towards. So a guy that normally would have a pretty safe floor, even with a tough matchup, I'm going to sit Pat Freiermuth. I'm going to try to find a guy that, even if I don't have a great other option, I'm going to look for some more upside there. So
before I get to mine, I do agree. I mean, Freiermuth kind of gets bailed out with a touchdown this past weekend, but without Pickens kind of being the go-to guy, because if you think back, like it was run, hit Pickens deep, play action, Freiermuth. Like that's what their offense has been. every once in a while you throw in Darnell what the heck's that? Washington in there, but that's what it's been, and it's been successful. But it wasn't that successful last week without Pickens, and then he just gets bailed out with the touchdown. So Don't blame me there. Untamed Music in the chat. Welcome in. Thank you. Hit that subscribe button if you would. And we'll answer your question here. Sit question Tua or Sam Darnold, I presume. Obviously here. So we are talking about Tua Tagovailoa. The Miami Dolphins, I kind of talked about this Houston-Miami game earlier. Two teams really need to go at it. And you've talked about Sam Darnold against the Chicago Bears. But now if we're going to discuss the two of them together, which side would you go to?
This is a tough one. And I love all of Miami's skill position players. And I like Tua as well. I'm going to lean Sam Darnold. And if you want to call it my Vikings bias, you can. The Dolphins have the Texans, who are statistically much worse against quarterbacks than the Bears are against quarterbacks. Like the Bears have been really good against quarterbacks, but I think, people haven't had to throw on them as much necessarily, especially recently. And I think that plays a little bit of a role. I think the Vikings at home, I think they're going to take advantage of this the big game that Addison and Jefferson just had. And I think they're going to find ways to get a lot of production again through the air. Sam Darnold is looking really good. And I'm not as afraid of the Bears defense as I would have been earlier in the year. So I like Sam, especially at least from a yardage standpoint, right? I also, when you look at Tua, he's looked really good. I definitely feel good starting him as well, but a lot of his pass a little bit shorter, quicker in rhythm. They hit the home run with the yak after that, but I just think that, you saw some deep balls last week. If you want to say that the Falcons matchup was just a really good matchup for the Vikings, I can understand it, but I'm going to lean Darnold here. I think there's a little bit more yards to be had and maybe an extra touchdown, but yeah, that's a tough problem to have, because I think both these guys I would consider top 10 quarterbacks this week. So
yeah, I think that Darnold's going to have a fine game. I do think that there was something to Kirk Cousins coming back to the building last week. The Falcons kept with them there through the third quarter. This game's what? 21.
It's 21-21 until
21 up.
Yeah, basically until the Ray McLeod. Oh no, we were up 7 when Ray McLeod had that fumble that then we went up 14. So, but it was pretty back and forth too.
Yeah, it was back and forth. The Falcons also had 2 guys fall down on deep bombs. So that in itself just starts to really amp up the yardage, and you get the touchdowns there. Not taking anything away from Sam Darnold. Tua Tagovailoa has been the quarterback 2 overall over the past 4 weeks. The Miami Dolphins are top 5 in scoring since he's come back from his concussion. He had that very first week, he wasn't great. I think he had less than 10 fantasy points. Since then, he's had over 20 fantasy points every single week. Only 50 burger Josh Allen has scored more fantasy points over the last 4 weeks than Tua has. I think you got to continue to ride the hot hand here. I think this offense is humming. Again, top 5, you love it. And you're right. There is a lot of yards after catch stuff, but he's got the guys can do it. Sam Darnold does as well. But I like this game to be potentially a little bit back and forth more than the Minnesota game. I think Minnesota could get up and kind of just grind it out afterwards. Again, I put a little stock into the fact that Kirk Cousins was on the other side. And so, Minnesota, they're not trying to slow down at that point, right? They want to show off Sam Darnold. Look who we got now, bud. Yeah. I really think there's a little bit of that too. Sure. From a human aspect of it. So, Sam Darnold's the third on this list. So Tua's second, Sam Darnold's third. But yeah, I like the consistency that we've seen out of Tua week after week, and I like this scoring offense. So I'm going Miami.
That's fair. That's fair.
Untamed says he's going Sammy D. That's also fair. You said it best when you said, I don't think you can go wrong. This is a good problem to have, right?
Yes.
It's a good problem to have. So.
You feel good about either of them. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. You just hope they both succeed for you. I guess I need to get my tight ends now, right?
Yes.
Is that where we're at here? Yep. I am going to go right back with my guy, Hunter Henry, at tight end for, as a streamer option. You're not starting him over any of the top guys by any means. I would probably start him over Pat Fryermuth. I wouldn't start him over like Sam Laporte or anything like that. So, but yeah, he's just like old reliable, right? If you just need a reliable, there's nobody out there who's got a huge ceiling, take the floor guy. Maybe Drake May hits him for the touchdown, and you're feeling fine. You get your points elsewhere this week.
Yep.
The sit of the week this week's going to be Jawan Johnson. Last 2 weeks ago, Taysom Hill gets hurt, so now Jawan Johnson looks great. He's getting all the tight end reps. He was a guy at the beginning of the year without Taysom Hill that was getting some good reps, and we've seen some great flashes over the course of the season. But similar to Las Vegas, New Orleans is also without their main guy in Derek Carr. Jake Hayner is going to be the quarterback this week for the New Orleans Saints. I don't think it does anything for Alvin Kamara. Like I'm still starting Alvin Kamara. He's one of the best in the league. But some ancillary guys like a Jawan Johnson at tight end, like I would say him, mostly due to not being able to trust that quarterback position.
Yep, I think that's fair. Yeah, and that's a good way to put it. Like some guys you got to be worried about a quarterback like this coming in and the switch, but other guys you don't, because that offense has to run through Kamara, and even if it's not running very well, he's going to get so many touches, you would assume, so he should be good. Yep.
Man, I'm just looking at this list since week 11. Lamar Jackson's, he had a bye, but he's down at 15.
Really? Interesting.
If I go off of average points, he's still down at 8. Tua, Sam Darnold, Jameis Winston, Anthony Richardson. Some names up here for quarterbacks.
Jeez, that's
names. Dragonfire in the chat. Thanks for being here. If you haven't already, guys, hit that subscribe button, like the video, help us reach more people. We'll continue to answer some of these. I'll give it a couple more minutes as we answer this one. So if anybody else in the chat has a start-sit question, now is the time to do it before we shut it down. Dragonfire needs 2 running backs. He's got Nick Chubb, Gus Edwards, Rachaad White, Isaiah Davis, or Travis Etienne. Let me start with this one here.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with Rachaad White. Bucky Irvin's got I think it's a back issue.
Mm-hmm. Back tightness or something, yes.
Had issues going into the game, was active for the game, ends up not playing most of the game. He is the key in this situation for me. If no Bucky Irving, Rachaad White is the guy. And Rachaad White might be the guy out of all these options anyways, even if Bucky is active. But I love Rachaad White here. Isaiah Davis is sneaky. I thought he looked great. I thought he looked better than Braylon Allen when watching a little bit of that game this past weekend. So I don't hate that option. I don't like Nick Chubb against the Chiefs. The Chiefs' run defense is where it's at. Jameis Winston might throw for 500 yards against the Chiefs' defense. He'll throw 4 picks and get sacked 7 times. But I don't like Nick Chubb against that run defense. Gus Edwards has shown us absolutely nothing.
Yeah. And
Travis Etienne is like a forgotten man this year. So definitely going Rachaad White in this. Probably Etienne over Isaiah Davis, but man, I really liked what I saw out of Isaiah Davis. What do you think out of these 5?
Yeah, I think you said it right first with the Rachaad White stuff. I think you're starting him for sure regardless, because even when Bucky Irving has had big games, Rachaad White has still gotten a solid amount of touches. He still gets his catches. He still gets some carries. And especially if Bucky Irving is injured into the game or is sitting for sure, then Rachaad White's a really nice play. And I think you'll be happy with his production. My second guy here, I'm going to stick with, I think you kind of, lean this way as well. I'm going to go Isaiah Davis also. The Jaguars are so bad against running backs. I mean, it was a little bit misleading because there was a low-scoring game with the Titans last week, but that's not a great offense. I know the Jets aren't exactly a great offense, but Isaiah Davis scored last week. He looked really good. Gus Edwards, like you said, he hasn't shown us enough to even worry about matchup because and the Chargers just haven't produced a ton regardless. We talked about it earlier. They haven't put up enough points each in enough games to really distribute a lot of fantasy production outside of Ladd McConkey. And so you're not really feeling super great about Gus Edwards. Nick Chubb against the Chiefs defense, I don't like it. ETN, especially with Bigsby there, I don't like that against the Jets run defense. So out of these two, I'm with you. I'm going Rachaad White and Isaiah Davis. And if Bucky Irving's out, then I'm actually very excited about that. If Bucky Irving's playing, I'm still including White there. I just think that from a consistent volume, even though he's not super efficient, I think that he'll get enough. I think he'll get enough run. And they're against the Chargers, who also have a good defense. So it's kind of tough, but you're looking at some real rough offenses there with the Jags and with what Gus Edwards has brought to the Chargers. So that's a tough situation. In a perfect world, we'd like to go back in time and just say Nick Chubb, because he's a great running back, but he just hasn't been there. So Jameis,
I think we had somebody ask us about Nick Chubb like a week or two ago.
Yeah.
And we might have said the same thing, like, I'd love to be able to say Nick Chubb, but
when he came back from injury, we looked ahead and we said, hey, he's got this nice matchup against New Orleans, and then it really toughens up for him.
Yeah.
And he didn't even do that well against that New Orleans, and that was a wild game. And so unfortunately, Nick Chubb just isn't it this year. So Rachaad White, Isaiah Davis is my picks there.
So I did a quick search here. Braylon Allen versus Isaiah Davis. 37 snaps to 36 snaps. So they literally 50-50. You might know this name. The only other running back that got one snap in this game, Kene Nwangwu. Is that how you say it?
Kene Nwangwu, yeah.
Nwangwu.
Yeah.
The old Viking guy, right? He was like their kick returner for a while, wasn't he?
Specialist. Oh, yeah.
That's right. Well, he got one snap for the Jets last week, but everything else was Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis.
Okay.
Target-wise, Braylon Allen 5, Isaiah Davis 6. Like they was like a true 50-50 timeshare here for Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen had 11 carries. Isaiah Davis had 10. So 15 touches to 13 touches. Everything says 50-50 split. Isaiah Davis gets the touchdown. I like that. I actually did not realize that. I kind of assumed Braylon Allen was more 60-40. 65-35. So actually seeing that Isaiah Davis was 50-50 there, I like that quite a bit. Dragonfire, thank you for for subscribing to our channel. We very, very much appreciate that.
Thank you.
Welcome in and come join us next Wednesday night as well. We will be back as we always are every Wednesday, helping you all with your start-sit questions as we get through the fantasy football playoffs, baby. Hopefully you're all in round 2 next week, the semifinals. Josh, before we get out of here, tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can hunt me down on Twitter, on X at JLime8 if you want to rage at me for any of the advice of mine that you took that failed. Or if you want to celebrate or commiserate. Fantasy football is fun. It's playoff time, so it's real fun. So just share. I like when people share stories too. I like reading comments of like, oh, I had this guy and he did this and I lost by this amount of points. Like that stuff's fun. So come find me on X at JLime8 and let's talk fantasy football. Appreciate everyone for checking in and good luck in your matchups this week.
Yeah, good luck indeed. Good luck with your best ball, sweats, your dynasty teams, your redraft leagues, whatever it is. Good luck with it all. Find me on X at TrevorS_FF and follow Bite Size Sports at Bite_Size Sports on X. If you are new to our show, we appreciate you being here, but come back tomorrow night for the Bounce with Kevin James and come back next Tuesday or go back and watch last night's show actually when they talked about playoff contenders on Necessary Roughness. Great show there with John and why am I blanking on his name? On who? Ben. John and Ben. So sorry about that for blanking there. Go check their show out from last night. It was a really solid show. I was tuning in when they were playing live last night. So go check that out. We will see you here next Wednesday night. Until then, good luck and may all the fantasy points be in your favor.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George. I hop in the Porsche, 5 and a horse. I'm ready for war. I'm coming for throats to turn to a ghost. I need to know everything. Now you be surprised.